Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes the real twist isn't what you expect. A marriage built on trust unravels, secrets spill into the open, and just when you think the truth is clear, another revelation turns everything upside down. How far would you go for justice? And what happens when the one pointing fingers isn't so innocent after all? Stay tuned for a story filled with deception, irony, and an ending you won't see coming. At Corny Tales, we don't just tell stories. We unravel betrayals, expose hidden truths, and watch karma strike when it hurts the most. Here, love isn't always pure, trust isn't always earned, and the ones you think are innocent, they just might be the biggest liars of all. If you crave stories that grip your soul, leave you questioning everything, and deliver twists you never saw coming, you're in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and brace yourself, because at Corny Tales, the most shocking revelations are only the beginning. It began as nothing more than an itch in the back of my mind, a subtle disturbance in the rhythm of my daily life. At first, it was easy to ignore, a fleeting thought, a whisper of doubt that I quickly pushed aside, telling myself that I was overthinking. After all, every marriage has its ups and downs, moments of closeness, followed by moments of distance. It was natural, wasn't it? But as the days passed, that nagging sensation in my chest refused to fade. It settled there like a weight, pressing down with an unrelenting grip. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, but deep down, I knew. Something wasn't right. Elena had changed. It wasn't sudden, nor was it dramatic. It was slow, almost imperceptible, like the gradual shift of seasons. At first, it was little things, things that seemed insignificant on their own. She started coming home later than usual, offering vague explanations about work running late or last-minute errands. Her smiles, once warm and effortless, had become strained, almost rehearsed. I would reach for her hand, and she would pull away. Under the pretense of distraction, her phone became an extension of her hand, rarely leaving her sight. She held it like it contained the secrets of the universe, always face down, always buzzing with messages that she never cared to explain. If I walked into the room unexpectedly, she would hastily close apps or angle the screen away from me. At night, she took it with her to the bathroom, something she never used to do. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe she was stressed, maybe she needed space. We'd been together for years, and it wasn't unheard of for people to go through phases where they needed time to themselves. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more I felt like I was lying to myself. I remember one evening in particular. I had made dinner, something I rarely did but wanted to surprise her. I set the table, lit a few candles, and waited. She had promised she would be home by 7. 7 came and went, then 8, then 9. When she finally walked through the door, her eyes barely met mine. "Oh," she said, glancing at the table. "You didn't have to do this." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wanted to. "Where were you?" She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "Work ran late." Then I grabbed a drink with some coworkers. Something about the way she said it sent a chill through me. The words felt too smooth, too practiced, like she had prepared them before stepping through the door. I studied her face, searching for the woman I thought I knew, but there was something unfamiliar about her. Her expression was unreadable, her posture detached. "Why didn't you text?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She sighed, exasperated. "I didn't think I needed to give you a play-by-play of my night." That was the first time I felt the walls between us solidify, turning from something unseen to something real. I didn't push further that night, but from that moment on, I started noticing more. The scent of unfamiliar cologne on her clothes, the way she started dressing differently, more effort in her appearance, more nights out with friends she never named. She began laughing at jokes on her phone, smiling at messages she never shared with me. Then there were the nights when she climbed into bed and turned away from me, her body a distant silhouette in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. When I reached for her, she stiffened, When I asked what was wrong, she would shake her head and say she was tired. The distance between us grew until it was an ocean, vast and uncrossable. I didn't know how to reach her anymore, and for the first time in our marriage, I was afraid to ask the question burning in my mind. Was she seeing someone else? Denial is a funny thing. It allows you to convince yourself that the obvious isn't real, that the signs pointing toward disaster are merely coincidences. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that I was overreacting, but my gut refused to be ignored. It screamed at me in the moments when I watched her slip out the door without a backward glance. It gnawed at me when I woke up in the middle of the night to find her still awake, staring at her phone with a faint smile she never wore around me anymore. One day, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. I needed the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. So I did something I never thought I would do. I checked her phone. It was locked, of course. She had changed her password, another thing she had never done before. My heart pounded as I put the device down, a sick feeling twisting in my gut. That night, I confronted her. I asked her outright, my voice steady even as my insides trembled. "Are you seeing someone else?" Her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She didn't deny it right away. Instead, she rolled her eyes, scoffing like the question itself was ridiculous. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You always overthink things." I felt my world tilt. "That's not an answer," she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Look, even if I was, it's not a big deal. You're overreacting." Overreacting. That word clanged through my mind like a hammer striking metal. Overreacting? To the fact that my wife, the woman I had trusted with everything, had betrayed me? My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. "How long?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She shrugged, as if it didn't matter, as if my pain was nothing more than an inconvenience to her. "Does it really matter?" And just like that, something inside me broke. The illusion of the life we had built shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. I wasn't overreacting. I was reacting exactly as any sane man would when faced with the realization that his marriage was a lie. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I made calls. To my family, to hers, to an attorney. She didn't seem to care about the fallout. She only cared that she had been exposed. But as I looked at her, truly looked at her, I realized something. She was no longer the woman I had loved. Maybe she never had been. And so I walked away, not because I was overreacting, but because I finally saw the truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a lie. It was the kind of truth that didn't just break a person, it shattered them, a reality so cruel and unforgiving that it left nothing in its wake but the wreckage of a life built on lies. For months, I had ignored the signs, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way Elena's smile had faded into something forced and distant. I had told myself I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, insecure. But the truth? The truth had been staring me in the face all along, and I had been too much of a fool to see it. Then, the truth smacked me in the face. She was cheating. Not a mistake, not a one-time lapse in judgment. This was something else entirely. It was calculated, methodical. A double life so intricately woven into our marriage that it made me question if anything had ever been real. And the worst part? She wasn't even sorry. I still remember the moment I found out. It was a regular evening, no different from any other, or at least that's what I thought. I had come home earlier than expected, eager to surprise her, maybe take her out for dinner, rekindle something that had felt lost in the last few months. But as I stepped into the house, a strange stillness settled over me, the kind that prickled at the edges of my mind like a warning I didn't yet understand. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, buzzing with a notification. She had always been careful, too careful. But this time she had slipped. A single moment of carelessness that unraveled everything. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize, followed by a message that made my blood run cold. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." The words blurred as my pulse thundered in my ears. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that. But I did, and what I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. Dozens of messages, sweet nothings, plans for secret rendezvous, declarations of love that had never been meant for me. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. So this was it. The gut feeling that had gnawed at me for months, the weight in my chest that refused to ease. It had all been for a reason, and now there was no denying it. She walked in moments later, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. When she saw me holding her phone, her face paled, but she masked it quickly. Too quickly. "Why are you going through my phone?" she snapped, as if I was the one in the wrong. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I had built my life with, the woman I had loved beyond reason, stood before me with arms crossed, her expression not one of guilt, but of irritation. Not because she had betrayed me, but because she had been caught. Who is he? My voice was eerily calm, almost unrecognizable. She rolled her eyes. "It's not what you think." I held up the phone, my knuckles white from the force of my grip. "Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think," she sighed, running a hand through her hair, her frustration evident. "Look, even if I was, it's not a big deal. You're overreacting." Overreacting? That single word slammed into me like a freight train. Overreacting? To the fact that my wife, the woman I had given everything to, had betrayed me in the worst possible way? Something inside me snapped. "How long?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. She shrugged, as if it didn't matter. As if my pain, my heartbreak, was nothing more than an inconvenience to her. Does it really matter? And just like that, the illusion shattered. The love I had for her, the trust I had placed in her, the life we had built, it all crumbled into dust. I wasn't overreacting. I was reacting exactly as any sane man would when faced with the undeniable truth that his marriage had been nothing but a lie. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment, every conversation, every time I had chosen to ignore the signs. The next morning, I made calls. To my family, to hers, to an attorney. She didn't seem to care. Not about the marriage, not about the hurt. She only cared about the fact that she had been exposed. But as I stood there looking at the woman I once loved, I realized something. She was no longer the person I had fallen for. Maybe she never had been. And so I walked away. Not because I was weak, not because I was overreacting, but because I finally saw the truth for what it was. And the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than living a lie. I thought I had unearthed every betrayal, that there was nothing left for Elena to take from me. But I wrong. The worst revelation came later. It arrived not as a dramatic confession or an argument, but as a cold, brutal truth I had never been meant to find out. I had been beaten. She had another child. A whole other child she never told me about. Hidden like a dirty secret. At first, I refused to believe it. It seemed too outrageous, too absurd, as though someone had twisted the story to make the betrayal even more devastating than it already was. But the truth doesn't care about what you're ready for. It shatters illusions without hesitation. I found out through a friend, someone who knew someone. A connection I barely remembered mentioning something offhandedly, unaware of the nuclear bomb they had just dropped on my life. "Did you know Elena has a son?" The words hung in the air, thick with implications. My mind went blank, my heart pounding in my ears. "What?" My voice came out hoarse, unfamiliar. "Yeah. It's crazy, right? I saw her with him a while ago. Thought you knew. But I had been married to this woman for years. I had loved her, planned a future with her, and believed I knew everything there was to know about her. And yet she had managed to keep an entire human being a secret from me. The betrayal hit me harder than her infidelity ever could. Cheating was one thing. It was an act of selfishness, of weakness, of indulgence. But hiding a child? That was something different. That was deception woven into the very fabric of our lives. That was years of calculated lies, omissions, and deliberate avoidance. I confronted her that night. My hands were shaking, my voice barely containing the storm brewing inside me. "Elena, do you have a child?" She looked up from her phone, barely flinching. There was a flicker of something in her expression, surprised perhaps that I had found out, but it was gone in an instant, replaced with her usual detached indifference. "Who told you?" Not a denial, not an attempt to gaslight me into questioning my own sanity, just that. "Who told you?" That was all I needed to know. "So it's true," I breathed, shaking my head. "You actually—" "It's none of your business," she interrupted, her tone flat. I stared at her, unable to comprehend the sheer audacity of her words. None of my business? I had married her, shared a life with her. If there was anyone in the world who had a right to know, it was me. "How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been hiding him from me?" She sighed, rolling her eyes like I was being unreasonable. "I didn't hide him. I just never mentioned him." I let out a bitter laugh, running a hand over my face. "Never mentioned? You have a child, Elena. That's not something you forget to bring up over dinner." She shrugged, as if it didn't matter, as if my entire world wasn't crumbling at my feet. "I didn't think it was relevant. It's from before us. It has nothing to do with you." I took a step back, needing distance, needing space to breathe. Every word out of her mouth made it worse. There was no remorse, no guilt, just deflection and excuses. "Does he know about me?" I asked, my voice raw. She hesitated for the first time, just for a second. That was all the answer I needed. "No," she admitted finally. "It's complicated." Complicated, that was what she called it. Not devastating, not earth-shattering, just complicated. I had thought that cheating was the worst of it, that discovering her affair had been the ultimate betrayal. But this was something else entirely. I had been married to a stranger, a woman who had lied to me not just with her words, but with her very existence, who had built an entire life around deception and half-truths, never once giving me the chance to know the full picture. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. "I'm done," I whispered, my voice barely more than breath. She didn't beg, she didn't cry, she simply nodded as if she had been expecting this outcome all along. And maybe she had. Maybe she had known deep down that one day the weight of her lies would finally crush whatever was left of us. I left that night, walked out without looking back, because there was nothing left to salvage, nothing left to hold on to. Elena had destroyed everything. And for the first time, I had no desire to pick up the pieces. That was it. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't overreacting. I was reacting exactly as a betrayed man should. For days I had wrestled with the turmoil inside me, questioning whether my anger, my heartbreak, my very sense of loss was somehow exaggerated. I had replayed our conversations over and over, trying to pinpoint the exact moment our marriage had turned into a carefully constructed illusion. But now, there was no doubt left in my mind. This wasn't an overreaction. It was the only rational response to being deceived in the most profound way possible. I had sacrificed for her. I had given her my time, my love, my loyalty, and in return she had fed me nothing but lies. I had trusted her, built a life around her, defended her, and in the end, she had discarded that trust like it was nothing. And she had the audacity to act as though I was the problem? As though my outrage, my grief, my need for justice was some kind of irrational response? No. That was gaslighting at its finest, and I refused to let it distort my reality any longer. I could still see the look on her face when I confronted her, the sigh, the roll of her eyes, the way she had dismissed my pain as if it were an inconvenience to her. "You're overreacting." Those words had burned into my mind, replaying like a broken record, each repetition fueling the fire inside me. Overreacting? No. If anything, I had been too restrained, too patient, too willing to give her the benefit of the doubt when she hadn't earned it. I had always thought betrayal would come with apologies, with desperation, with some semblance of regret. I had expected tears, confessions, anything to indicate that she understood the gravity of what she had done. But I got none of that. Just indifference. Just a callousness that revealed exactly how little I had ever meant to her. That was the moment I realized I didn't have to be the one suffering in silence. She had made her choices and she had to live with the consequences. And so, I made my own choice. I told everyone, her mother, her father, her siblings, even her closest friends. I let the truth out like a caged beast, letting it tear through the carefully curated facade she had built over the years. And then, something unexpected happened. No one defended her. Her mother, the woman who had raised her, who I had expected to at least try to justify her daughter's actions, was the first to speak. And when she did, the disgust in her voice was unmistakable. "You're a skank and a lowlife." The words were sharp, unforgiving, and for the first time, I saw its shame flickering in Alina's eyes. Not because she had hurt me, not because she had betrayed our vows, but because she had been exposed. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This woman, this person I had spent years of my life loving, wasn't ashamed of what she had done. She was only ashamed that people knew, that the mask had slipped, that she could no longer control the narrative. And that was when the final undeniable truth settled in. I had spent too long grieving for something that had never truly existed. I had wasted tears on a marriage that had been a lie from the start. Elena wasn't sorry because she didn't know how to be. She didn't feel guilt because she didn't believe she had done anything wrong. And that was the most painful revelation of all. So, no, I wasn't overreacting. I was reacting exactly as any person would when faced with the brutal reality that the life they thought they had was nothing more than an illusion. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace, because I was done. Now, I'm meeting with my attorney. The office is cold, sterile. Its walls lined with books that hold the fate of marriages like mine. I sit across from a man who has seen this scenario unfold 1,000 times before. He's professional, unemotional, the kind of person who speaks in facts rather than feelings, and I respect that, because feelings have ruled my life for too long. He slides a stack of papers toward me, their weight heavier than anything I've ever held before. Divorce papers, the official end of everything I thought I was building. But as I stare at them, the ache in my chest isn't grief, it's relief. I will not be another fool in her trail of lies. I refuse. She has taken so much from me. Years I can never get back. Trust I can never fully rebuild. Love I can never give again in the same way. But this is where I take control. This is where I set myself free. For too long, I let my emotions dictate my actions. I wrestled with doubt, with guilt, with the gnawing fear that I was the one in the wrong. I tortured myself over whether exposing her was an act of vengeance rather than justice. But now, I know better. Exposing her wasn't revenge, it was justice. Justice for every lie she told. Justice for every night I spent waiting up, wondering where she was. Justice for every look of indifference, every moment she made me feel small, unimportant, like I was the one who wasn't enough. And justice, most of all, for myself. The man who had been too blind to see the truth until it was shoved in his face. I think back to the moment I confronted her, to the way she sighed, rolled her eyes, dismissed my pain like I was an inconvenience. "You're overreacting." I remember the look on her face when her mother called her out, when she realized the world was no longer willing to play along with her lies. For the first time, she had to taste the bitterness of her own deception. And it burned. Now, it's my turn to walk away, not as a victim, not as a broken man, but as someone who has reclaimed his dignity. I pick up the pen, pressing it to paper, signing my name with steady hands. This isn't just the end of a marriage. It's the beginning of my freedom. I step out of the law office, the crisp air hitting my face as if waking me up from a long nightmare. I breathe deeply, inhaling the possibility of a new beginning. The weight that had sat so heavily on my chest is beginning to lift. I don't know what comes next, but I do know one thing. I will never let myself be trapped in someone else's web of lies again. The drive home is quiet. My hands grip the steering wheel, knuckles white, the reality settling in. Everything we built together, every holiday, every inside joke, every plan for the future is now reduced to signatures on legal documents. The house feels emptier than ever, the silence echoing my newfound solitude. But for the first time in a long time, I don't feel alone. I feel free. My phone buzzes, a message from a mutual friend. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. I stare at the screen, my mind swirling. People had seen the truth now. The facade she had spent years perfecting had finally cracked, and I wasn't the one left picking up the piece she was. And the best part? I didn't have to care anymore. Days pass, then weeks. Each one a step further away from the wreckage she left behind. The divorce process is exhausting, a legal tug-of-war over assets and possessions. But my mind is already made up. I don't want anything that reminds me of her. Let her have the furniture, the dishes, the photos we once cherished. I don't need them. I am starting over, and that means letting go of everything that tied me to her, physically and emotionally. She tries to reach out once, a pathetic attempt at salvaging something, maybe her own pride. A weak text, "Can we talk?" But she gets no reply. What could she possibly say? That she's sorry? That she misses me? That she didn't mean to throw away what we had? None of it would matter. There are no words that could undo what she did. No amount of regret could rewrite the past. I think about the man I was before all of this. The one who would have agonized over that message, who would have debated whether to respond, whether to listen. But that man is gone. In his place stands someone who finally understands his own worth. Someone who knows that love should never be a battlefield of deceit and indifference. And as I walk away from this mess, I realize something profound. I am not the villain of this story. I am not the weak, heartbroken man she thought she could leave in ruins. I am the survivor, the one who walked through the fire and emerged unburned. The finalization of the divorce arrives on a Thursday. An unremarkable day, yet one that marks the most significant change in my life. The papers come in the mail, stamped and official. I stare at them, waiting for some wave of emotion, grief, sadness, regret. But all I feel is closure. She is no longer my problem, no longer my burden to carry, no longer my anything. I pour myself a drink, not to numb the pain, but to toast to my future, to the life that is now mine to reclaim, to the peace that comes with knowing I did what was right. Justice has been served, and I am finally free. I thought I was done with her. I thought signing those divorce papers meant I would never have to look into her eyes again, never have to listen to her excuses, never have to be in the same room as the woman who destroyed everything we built. But then came the news that shattered the illusion of finality. Alina was pregnant, and not just pregnant. She was carrying my child. When I first heard it, my mind refused to process the words. I had spent months untangling myself from her lies, walking away from the wreckage she left behind, believing I was finally free. And now? Now I was tethered to her forever in the most permanent way possible. The first meeting was inevitable. There were things that needed to be discussed. I wouldn't walk away from my own child, but I also wouldn't let her dictate the terms of my involvement. So there we were, sitting across from each other at a small cafe, the tension between us thick enough to suffocate. She looked different, more subdued, less composed. like the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. But that didn't change what she had done. It didn't change what she had taken from me. She sipped her tea, eyes darting around the cafe, as if searching for an escape. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know how to tell you," I scoffed. "You didn't know how to tell me? Or you didn't want to?" She sighed, rubbing a hand over her belly, a subconscious gesture that made my stomach twist. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about the life growing inside her, the child who had no say in the mess we created. "I made mistakes," she admitted, voice quieter now. "But this baby isn't one of them." "No," I agreed. "The baby isn't the mistake. But everything else? That's a different story." Silence stretched between us. There was so much I wanted to say, so much anger I wanted to unleash, but what good would it do? The damage was done. Now, all that mattered was what came next. "So, what now?" I asked, leaning back in my chair, watching her carefully. "Who does the baby stay with?" She frowned. "What do you mean? The baby stays with me, of course." I let out a bitter laugh. "You really think I'm just going to stand by and let you raise my child on your own?" "I'll allow you to visit," she said carefully, like she was doing me a favor. "But I'll be the primary parent. I'll be the one making the decisions." My jaw tightened. "That's not your choice to make, Alina." Her eyes flashed with frustration. "I'm the one carrying this baby. I'll be the one giving birth. Of course, it's my choice." "No," I said firmly. "It's our choice. This baby isn't just yours. It's mine too, and I will fight for my rights as a father." Her hands clenched into fists. "You don't understand what it's like, being pregnant, feeling everything change, knowing you're the one who has to carry the responsibility." I leaned forward, voice low and steady. "And you don't understand what it's like to be betrayed by the mother of your child. To find out that the person you once loved had been living a lie. But despite that, I'm here. I'm willing to be a father, and I will not be sidelined." She looked away, her jaw tightening, but I saw it. The fear, the uncertainty. She had expected me to walk away, to leave her to deal with this alone. But I wasn't like her. I wouldn't abandon my own flesh and blood. "We need a plan," I said, my voice softer now. "Not for us, for the baby." She nodded, reluctant but knowing there was no other option. "A co-parenting agreement?" I nodded. "We get lawyers involved. We set clear terms, no hidden agendas, no games." For the first time, she looked me in the eye. "Fine." And just like that, the battle for our child had begun. The second meeting wasn't as civil. We met in her apartment, a space that had once been ours but now felt foreign. The walls had been repainted, new decorations placed strategically, as if trying to erase the past, but no amount of fresh paint could cover the cracks between us. "I don't trust you," I said plainly, arms crossed. "You've lied to me too many times." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm not lying about this." "That's the problem, Elena. I don't know when you're telling the truth anymore." She exhaled sharply. "So, what do you want? Full custody? To take the baby away from me completely?" I hesitated. That wasn't my intention, but I also wasn't going to let her control everything. "I want joint custody. I want to be there for my child every step of the way." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, so now you suddenly care about being a father?" I clenched my fists. "Don't twist this. You hid this pregnancy from me. I had to find out through someone else. And you expect me to just trust that you'll be fair?" She stared at me for a long moment. "You think I don't regret what I did?" I shook my head. "No, I don't. I think you regret getting caught." Her eyes darkened. "That's not fair." I shrugged. "Neither was what you did to me. But this isn't about us anymore. This is about the baby." For the first time, I saw something shift in her expression, a flicker of understanding, of realization that this wasn't a battle she could win through manipulation. "Fine," she finally said, shoulders sagging. We'll set up a legal agreement. We'll make sure everything is in writing. Good. But as I walked out of that apartment, I knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. Elena sat in her dimly lit apartment, her fingers wrapped around a glass of wine, staring at the city skyline. The past few months had been a whirlwind of legal battles, custody discussions, and emotional turmoil. She was exhausted, but tonight, she wasn't feeling sorrow or regret. No, tonight, she was feeling something else entirely. Amusement. She had just gone off the phone with an old friend, one who had always remained neutral throughout her messy divorce. But this time, her friend had called her with something juicy, something unexpected. Her ex-husband had also cheated during their marriage. The revelation hit her like a slap, and then seconds later it melted into a dark, ironic laughter bubbling up from her chest. She placed her wine glass down, covering her mouth as she chuckled to herself, shaking her head in disbelief. How can a man act like he is a saint when he is the real devil? She muttered under her breath, her voice tinged with a mixture of bitterness and hilarity. She thought back to the way he had confronted her, the disgust in his eyes, the self-righteous anger that had fueled his every word. He had acted like the ultimate victim, the betrayed husband, the wounded man who had been wronged, and all the while he had been doing the exact same thing behind her back. She leaned back against her couch, exhaling slowly. The irony of it all was almost too much to handle. How many times had he accused her of being heartless? How many times had he painted himself as the perfect, faithful spouse while she had been labeled the villain? Elena wasn't naive. She knew what she did was wrong. She had made mistakes. She had betrayed his trust. But to find out that the very man who condemned her was just as guilty, that was something else entirely. Her mind wandered back to their last argument about the baby, the tension in that room, the anger in his voice when he demanded joint custody, when he accused her of being manipulative, of being untrustworthy. How dare he stand there and act like he had been pure, like he had been above deceit, like he had never once betrayed their vows. She grabbed her phone, scrolling through old messages, old photos, remnants of the past she had yet to delete. There was a time when she loved him, deeply. There was a time when she had imagined growing old with him, raising a family, building a life together. But that version of their future had long since crumbled. And now, looking back, she wondered if it had ever been real to begin with. Had he cheated first? Had his infidelity started before hers? Or had it been a revenge affair, a desperate attempt to level the playing field once he found out about her betrayal? She would never know. And honestly, she didn't care. All she knew was that she had wasted too much time feeling guilty. Too much time beating herself up over the past. But tonight she felt lighter, free. She sipped her wine, letting the warmth of it spread through her body, her lips curling into a smirk. Let him think whatever he wanted. Let him believe he was still the better person. She knew the truth now, and that was enough. Days passed, and the more Elena thought about it, the funnier it became. Her ex-husband had spent months dragging her name through the mud, making sure everyone knew about her mistakes, about how she had broken their vows, about how she was the unfaithful one, and all the while he had been guilty of the same sin. She imagined his face when he found out she knew. She imagined the way his jaw would tighten, the way his shoulders would tense. Would he try to deny it? Would he try to justify it? It didn't matter. At the end of the day, they were both flawed. They had both lied. They had both betrayed each other in different ways. The only difference was that she had been caught first. Elena chuckled to herself, pouring another glass of wine. "Saint my ass," she muttered. Maybe in another lifetime they could have made it work. Maybe if things had been different, if they had been more honest, if they had communicated instead of seeking comfort elsewhere, their marriage could have survived. But in this lifetime, their story was already over. And for the first time in a long time, she was okay with that. That's a wrap on today's thrilling story. Now I want to hear from you. Did the twist catch you off guard, or did you see it coming? Share your thoughts in the comments and let's dive into the discussion. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join the Corny Tales family by smashing that subscribe button because trust me, the next story is going to be even more shocking. Make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a jaw-dropping moment. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay tuned for more unexpected twists.